The ruins of the battlefield were silent. The smoke still rose from broken machines and shattered walls. The sky was dark with ash, hiding the stars that once gave hope. A mother lay in the cold ground, her arms wrapped around her small child. Her body was weak, her breath was slow, and her eyes heavy with pain. She knew the end was near. Her people had fought, her people had fallen. She had run, carrying her child, searching for safety, but safety never came. Now, she had nothing left but the child in her arms. The child's skin was pale, the small chest rising and falling with fragile breath. She pressed her face close, whispering soft words of goodbye. The mother told herself that death would be kind, that it was better to die here together than to let the enemy find them. The enemy, the humans, were said to be merciless. They were told humans burned villages, destroyed cities, and never spared the weak. She closed her eyes, waiting for the last breath to escape her lips. Her heart was heavy, but at least she would not die alone. Then footsteps. The sound echoed in the silence, slow and heavy. The mother's eyes opened wide with fear. Her heart raced as the sound came closer. She pulled her child tighter, ready to shield the little one with her own body. She whispered a final prayer, asking the stars above to forgive her. The shadow appeared through the smoke, a figure tall, broad, carrying something long across his back. The mother froze, her body trembling. The figure came closer, and then the truth was clear. It was a human. The human wore torn armor, his face covered in dirt and blood. His steps were slow, heavy, but his eyes burned with life. He stopped a short distance away. The mother expected death. She expected a weapon to rise. But instead, the human only looked at her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The human did not speak. The mother did not breathe. Only the sound of the child's weak breath filled the air. Finally, the human dropped to one knee. He reached behind and pulled something from his back. Not a weapon, but a cloak. The cloak was worn, torn but still warm. The human placed it gently over the mother and the child. The mother stared, her mind unable to understand. Why would an enemy cover her? Why would a human give warmth instead of death? Her lips trembled, her voice broken. Why? She whispered. The human did not answer. Instead, he pulled a small flask from his side. He opened it and carefully brought it close. He held it out with steady hands, showing no threat, only offering. The mother hesitated, fear gripping her heart. But her child stirred, the small lips dry and cracked. The child whimpered weakly. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached for the flask. The water touched her lips first, cool and real. She then gave it to her child, who swallowed weakly. The child's breath grew steadier, if only a little. The mother could not believe. Her enemy had saved her child. Her enemy had given warmth, not death. Her eyes lifted again to the human. She wanted to hate. She wanted to resist. But her heart trembled. The stories she was told were breaking apart before her eyes. The human did not speak a single word. He simply sat beside them, breathing slowly. His eyes scanned the ruins, guarding them as if they were his own. The mother held her child closer, her body shaking, her heart confused. She thought she had accepted death. But now, beside this strange human, life refused to let her go. The night grew colder, but the cloak was warm. The silence deepened, but the human stayed. The mother stared at the stars hidden behind the smoke. For the first time, she wondered, maybe humans were not monsters. Maybe they carried a warmth that even death could not steal. The night grew darker, the cold air cutting deep. The mother held her child close, her weak arms shaking, but the cloak around them gave a little warmth, a little comfort. It was not hers. It was not from her people. It was from the human, the enemy she had feared her whole life. The human sat nearby, silent still, his eyes watching the shadows. His body was tired, his armor broken, but his hands steady. He did not look at her with anger. He did not raise his weapon. He looked only at the ruins, like a guard, like a shield. The mother could not understand. She whispered to her child, "Sleep, my star, sleep." but her eyes stayed on the human, searching for answers. Why would he help? Why would he share water? Why would he give his cloak when the night was so cold? The stories told of humans were full of fire, cruelty, and death. Yet here sat a human who gave life, not death. The child stirred weakly, the small hand reaching for the human's cloak. The mother tried to pull the hand back, afraid, but the human noticed, his eyes softening. Slowly, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration. It was hard bread, dry and rough, but it was food. He broke it carefully, placing the smaller piece near the mother. Then he held the other piece near the child, offering gently. The mother shook her head, her lips trembling. She thought it was a trick. She thought it was poison, but the child's hungry eyes locked on the bread. The human waited, patient, his hand steady. Finally, the mother took the bread with shaking fingers. She touched it to her lips, then gave a tiny piece to the child. The child chewed slowly, weak but alive. The mother's heart broke with relief. She looked at the human again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why?" she asked. Her language was different, but the word was clear. The human met her eyes but said nothing. Instead, he gave a tired smile, small but real. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left, yet still chose to give. Hours passed, the night stretched on. Outside, machines roamed the ruins, searching for survivors. Strange lights cut through the dark, buzzing like insects. The mother feared they would be found. She prayed silently, clutching her child close. Then, one of the machines drew too near, its red eye glowing. The human rose, moving like a shadow. He picked up a broken stone and threw it far away. The machine turned, chasing the noise, vanishing into the smoke. The human returned, sitting once more, breathing hard. The mother stared at him with wide eyes. This enemy had just saved them again, not with a weapon, but with his mind, with his will. Her fear slowly began to change. It was still there, deep and sharp, but something new grew beside it, something dangerous. Hope. The child shifted in her arms, the small lips curving into a faint smile. The sound of a weak laugh escaped, soft as a whisper. The mother froze, tears filling her eyes. Her child had not laughed since the war began, since the screams and fire had stolen everything. Now, in the arms of a dying mother, under the cloak of an enemy, her child laughed. The human saw this, and his tired smile grew. For the first time, the mother saw no monster, no killer. She saw only a person, weary and wounded, yet full of strange warmth. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was something different, something fragile. It was the start of trust. The mother leaned her head back, eyes closing for a moment. Her heart was still heavy, but a question burned within her. If an enemy could give warmth, if an enemy could protect a child, then what else was she wrong about? What else had the war stolen from the truth? She opened her eyes again, looking at the human. He sat with his head bowed, resting but not asleep, his hand still close to his weapon, his body still ready to fight. Yet his presence was not of a killer, it was of a guardian. The mother whispered softly, almost to herself, "Maybe death will not take us tonight." And for the first time since the war began, she believed those words. The morning light was pale, slipping through the cracks of ruined walls. The mother opened her eyes slowly, her body aching, her child still pressed close to her chest. The human was already awake, sitting nearby, his eyes sharp and watchful. He had not left during the night, he had not abandoned them. Instead, he stayed, as if bound to them by an invisible chain. The mother's heart beat fast when his eyes met hers. Fear still lived inside her, heavy and cold. But there was something else now, something softer that she could not name. Her people always said humans were enemies, dangerous and cruel. Yet, this one had given them warmth, food, and life. The child stirred, weak but alive. The small hands reached for the flask again. The human noticed, and without hesitation, he offered it. His movements were careful, slow, never rushed, as if he knew they feared him, as if he wanted to show no harm. The mother's lips trembled as she whispered, "You, enemy." Her voice was broken, her words simple but her meaning clear. The human paused, looking at her with eyes that carried both pain and something deeper. He shook his head slowly. "No, enemy," he said in his own tongue, his voice low and steady. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the way he spoke them, not with anger, not with threat, but with a truth that reached her heart. Her mind screamed not to believe, but her heart whispered to listen. The child, innocent and unaware of war, stretched a hand toward the human. The mother gasped softly, trying to pull the hand back, but the human did not flinch. He took the small hand gently in his own rough palm, and for a brief moment, the ruins felt less broken. The mother watched in silence, her chest heavy with questions. Why would an enemy risk so much for them? Why would he share his food, his water, his cloak? Why would he fight the cold, fight the machines, just to keep them safe? She could not find an answer. The day moved slowly, and hunger grew again. The human reached into his pack, pulling out another piece of bread. It was small, not enough even for him, yet he offered it to her and the child, keeping nothing for himself. The mother's eyes widened, her voice breaking. "You not eat?" The human shook his head, pushing the food closer to her hands. Her throat tightened, her eyes burning with tears. She could no longer see only an enemy. She could only see a savior, but trust was a dangerous thing. The war had taught her that. Trust killed faster than any weapon. Still, she could not stop the warmth spreading inside her heart. Every time the human acted, her belief in old stories cracked a little more. Every time he gave, every time he protected, she felt the chains of fear weaken. Later, as the sun climbed higher, danger returned. The sharp sound of machines echoed through the ruins. The mother froze, clutching her child tight. The human raised a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. He moved like a shadow, picking up his weapon. He stood at the edge of their broken shelter, his body a wall between them and the outside. The machines passed, their lights sweeping close. The human stayed still, his breath steady. Only when the danger was gone did he lower his weapon. He looked back at her, his face calm, but his eyes full of exhaustion. The mother could only stare. This human was not her killer. He was her shield. Her heart whispered louder now. Maybe the enemy she feared was not the one before her. Maybe he was something else, something greater. She did not have the word for it, but she felt it deep in her soul. The child pressed against her, whispering in a soft, tired voice, "Safe." The mother's eyes filled with tears. Her child had spoken a word she thought would never return, a word she had buried in the ashes of war, and it was spoken while holding the hand of a human. The mother lowered her head, whispering softly, "Enemy or savior?" She did not know the answer yet, but she knew one truth. If not for this human, she and her child would already be gone, and so against the fear in her heart, against the stories of her people, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe humans were not only destroyers, maybe they could also be protectors. Maybe they could be something more. The ruins grew darker as the sun vanished behind the ash-filled sky. The mother felt the cold return, sharper and heavier. Her child pressed close to her chest, shivering even under the human's cloak. She whispered soft words to comfort the child, but her own voice shook. The human sat near them, silent as stone, his weapon resting across his knees. The night was dangerous, more dangerous than the day. When the machines moved freely in the dark, searching for survivors, their red eyes cut through the smoke, scanning every shadow. And far away, the cries of other creatures echoed, drawn by blood and ruin. The mother knew that if they were found, they would not live until morning. The human seemed to know this too. His eyes never closed, his head always turning toward the faintest sound. Every breath he took was measured, quiet, careful. The mother could feel his presence like a shield. It was strange, terrifying, yet also comforting. The child stirred, whispering weakly, "Hungry." The mother's heart ached, her hands trembling as she tried to soothe. But she had no food left, no strength to give. The human noticed, his gaze softening. He reached into his pack once more, pulling out a small piece of dried meat. Without a word, he placed it in the mother's hands. She stared at it, then at him, her voice breaking. "You not eat?" He shook his head, pushing the food closer. The mother's tears fell as she gave the piece to her child. The small hands held it tightly, nibbling slowly. A faint smile touched the child's lips, and the mother's heart cracked. Open, the silence of the night was broken by a distant sound, a metallic growl, deep and sharp. The human stood instantly, raising his weapon. He moved to the edge of the shelter, his body tense. The mother's blood turned to ice, clutching her child tight. The sound grew closer, heavy steps crushing broken stone. The machines were coming. The human turned, his eyes meeting hers. He raised one finger to his lips. Silence. The mother nodded, holding her child's mouth gently with her hand. Her own breath felt like thunder in her chest. Through the cracks in the wall, a glowing red light passed, closer, closer, until it painted the broken stones in crimson. The machine's steps shook the ground. It stopped just outside the shelter, its red eye scanning. The mother's heart nearly stopped. Her child trembling against her chest. One sound, one movement, and they would be found. The human crouched low, his hand gripping the weapon tightly. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fierce fire. The machine's red eye swept past them. For a long moment, it paused. The mother prayed in silence, prayed harder than she ever had, and then, slowly, the machine turned and walked away, the sound of its steps fading into the distance. The human lowered his weapon, releasing a slow breath. The mother almost collapsed from relief, her whole body shaking, her eyes wet with tears. The human returned. To her side, his face unreadable, but his presence spoke louder than words. He had risked everything to keep them hidden. The mother looked at him with new eyes. No longer only fear, no longer only doubt. Something deeper grew, something that frightened her even more, trust. The hours dragged on, each minute heavy with silence. The cold deepened, and the wind cut through the ruins like knives. The human adjusted the cloak around them, making sure the child was warm. He did not sleep. He did not rest. He simply stayed awake, watching the night with endless patience. The mother wanted to speak, to ask who he was, why he helped, but the words died in her throat. She was afraid of the answers, afraid of what truth might mean. The child, exhausted, finally slept peacefully. The mother listened to the soft breathing for the first time since the war began. Her child slept without fear. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering softly, "Thank you." The words were weak, broken, but real. The human turned his head toward her. He did not reply, only gave a small nod. And somehow, that was enough. The night stretched long, filled with danger and silence. But within that broken shelter, something had changed. The mother no longer felt only despair. The child no longer trembled with only fear. And the human no longer seemed like an enemy. He was something else, something unknown. Perhaps even something like hope. When the first light of dawn touched the ruins, the mother opened her eyes. Her child was still alive, still breathing, and the human was still there, watching the horizon with tired eyes. The long night had not taken them, because a human's warmth refused to let them go. The new day rose slowly, weak sunlight touching the ruins. The mother sat with her child in her arms, still wrapped in the human's cloak. The long night had passed, but the fear still lingered in her chest. The human was awake, his tired eyes scanning the horizon. He had not slept, not even for a moment. The child stirred, opening small eyes. The mother smiled faintly, brushing a hand across the little face. The child's first word was soft, almost broken. Warm. The mother's heart ached because the warmth did not come from her. It came from the enemy sitting only a few steps away. The human noticed, and for the first time since dawn, he smiled. It was a small smile, weak but kind. The mother looked away quickly, unsure what to feel. Her people had always told her that humans were monsters, but the monster before her had guarded them all night. The monster had given food, water, and even hope. She whispered in her tongue, "Why do you help us?" The human did not understand her words, but he understood her eyes. He pointed at the child, then at his own chest. He placed a hand on his heart and gave a firm nod. The mother's lips parted, her eyes wide. He was telling her without words, the child must live. Something inside her shifted, something she could not stop. Fear was still there, but it was no longer alone. Now there was something new. Respect. Respect for the one she once called enemy. Respect for the one who chose to protect instead of destroy. The day moved slowly, and hunger returned again. The human searched the ruins carefully. He brought back a few roots, some dry plants, and broken cans. It was not much, but he tried. Together, they made a small fire, hidden under stones to avoid machines. The human showed her how to heat the roots. The mother watched closely, learning each movement. Her child ate first, smiling faintly with every bite. And in that moment she realized they were no longer strangers. They were something else. The child laughed softly, a weak but real laugh. The mother froze, her heart breaking open. Her child had not laughed since the war began. She looked at the human, tears in her eyes. The child pointed at him, saying softly, "Friend?" The human blinked, surprised, then smiled again. The mother's lips trembled. She could not speak. Her child had given the word she could not, a word that broke every wall between them. As the day stretched on, they tried to speak. Her words were different, his tongue strange. But they found ways. Through gestures, through pointing, through small sounds. The human showed her water by touching the flask. He showed her food by pointing at the bread. She repeated the sounds slowly, uncertain but willing. He repeated her words too, clumsy but patient, step by step. They built a bridge of language, and with every word shared, the gap between enemy and ally grew smaller. Later, as the sun lowered again, danger returned. Distant drones circled overhead, their engines buzzing like angry insects. The human pulled her and the child close, guiding them into deeper ruins. They hid under broken metal, waiting in silence. The red eyes passed above, scanning, searching. The mother held her breath, her heart racing. The human's hand pressed against hers, steady and firm. It was not a gesture of fear. It was a promise. He would not let them be taken. When the danger was gone, they stepped out together. The child clung to both of them. One hand on her, one hand on him. The mother looked at their joined hands, her chest heavy. Her child did not see war, did not see enemy. Her child only saw safety, warmth, and life. And that safety came from a human. The mother thought of her people. She thought of how they had fled, leaving her behind. She thought of how this human stayed, though he had every chance to leave. The truth was heavy, painful. Her people had abandoned her, but her enemy had not. As night approached once more, they returned to the shelter. The fire was small, but its light touched their faces. The human sat across from her, his eyes soft in the glow. She wanted to speak, to ask his name, to tell him hers, but words were still too weak. So instead, she placed her hand on her chest, then pointed to herself. "Alira," she whispered, giving her name. The human blinked, then nodded slowly. He touched his chest, pointing to himself. "Daniel," he said, his voice low but clear. Her heart trembled, the sound of his name filling her ears. It was no longer enemy, no longer monster. It was Daniel, the human who gave warmth, the human who guarded. Her child, the human who shared food, water, and hope. And as the stars slowly broke through the ash above, Alira realized the truth. They were no longer only survivors of war. They were no longer only strangers. They were something far greater. They were a bond beyond species, a bond born in fire and ruin, And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a future. The morning came with a weak light breaking through the smoke-filled sky. Alira opened her eyes slowly, her child still asleep in her arms. Beside them, Daniel sat with his back against the broken wall. His weapon rested on his lap. His eyes, half closed but still watchful, he had not abandoned them, not once. For a moment, Alira simply watched him. The lines of exhaustion marked his face. His armor was torn, his skin bruised, but his will unbroken. She thought of how many times he could have left, how many chances he had to walk away, but he stayed, always staying. The child stirred, whispering softly, "Mama." Alira smiled, pressing her lips to the child's forehead, the warmth of life still there, still strong, all because of the human sitting nearby. Her heart tightened with something she had not felt in years. Hope. Daniel noticed the child waking, and he gave a faint smile. He pulled a small scrap of food from his pack, offering it once more. Alira hesitated, but this time there was no fear. She accepted it, broke it in half, and gave the larger piece to her child. Daniel said nothing, but the quiet respect in his eyes spoke louder than words. When the child finished eating, Daniel rose to his feet. He looked at the horizon, then back at Alira. He pointed forward, away from the ruins, his voice calm but firm. "Safe." There. Alira understood, even with few words. He wanted to move. He wanted to guide them to safety. Her body was weak, her child even weaker. But she trusted him now. She nodded slowly, whispering, "We go." Daniel gave a short nod in return, and so together they began their journey. The ruins stretched far, broken metal and stone littering the ground. Each step was heavy, each breath hard. But Daniel walked ahead. Steady and strong, he cleared the path, helped Alira climb over rubble, and when her legs trembled, he offered his hand. She hesitated at first, then finally placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, unshakable. In that moment, she did not feel like a burden. She felt like someone worth saving. The day grew long, the sun hidden behind smoke and ash. They moved quietly, avoiding the sound of machines. Twice they were forced to hide, pressing close against broken walls. Red eyes scanned the ruins, searching, but Daniel never let them be seen. His body always shielding them, his hand always ready to guide. As hours passed, Alira began to see something she had forgotten. The world was not only ruins and death. There were still small signs of life. A flower pushing through cracks in the stone. Birds flying in the distance, calling faintly through the silence. Her child noticed too, pointing with a smile. For the first time since the war began, the child saw beauty instead of fear. Alira's heart broke, but in a way that brought healing, not pain. When night approached, Daniel found a safer place to rest. It was the remains of a half-buried shelter. Broken, yes, but hidden well beneath stone. They entered carefully, the child curling close to Alira. Daniel lit a small fire, barely enough to see, but enough to warm. The three of them sat in silence. The flames touching their faces, Alira finally spoke, her voice soft. "You save us. Why?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his eyes heavy with memory. Then he placed a hand on his chest, whispering one word. "Family." The sound of it struck her heart like thunder. She understood without needing more. He was not only saving them. He was remembering someone he had lost. Alira lowered her head, her throat tight with emotion. Her child slept soundly in her lap, safe for another night, and she knew the truth. Daniel was more than an enemy, more than a soldier. He was a human who carried a pain she could not see, and yet instead of letting pain turn to cruelty, he chose kindness. The fire burned low, and the night grew colder, but Alira no longer felt only fear. She felt strength, a strange strength she had not known in years, because she was not walking alone anymore, because her child was not facing death alone. Daniel's presence was proof that life could still fight, proof that maybe humans were not monsters but something greater. When she closed her eyes that night for the first time, her dreams were not full of fire and screams. They were full of stars. And in those stars she saw her child running, laughing, living, all because one human's warmth refused to let go. The morning was quiet, the sky still heavy with smoke. But there was a different feeling in the air, a softer weight. Alira woke to the sound of her child's laughter, faint but real. The small voice echoing inside the hidden shelter like a song. Her heart swelled, for that sound had been stolen from her long ago. Now it returned, carried by the warmth of a human who should have been her enemy. Daniel stood at the edge of the shelter, scanning the horizon, his body tired, his face marked with scars and dirt. Yet his eyes carried something unbroken. He turned when he heard the laughter, and for the first time, he truly smiled. Not the tired smile of survival, but the honest smile of life. The journey ahead was still long. They had not yet reached safety, but hope had become their companion. It walked with them, step by step, and it was stronger than fear. They set out together once more. The ruins stretched far, but Daniel guided them with steady steps. When Alira stumbled, his hand caught her. When the child cried, his cloak wrapped tighter around them. Every moment was proof that he would not leave. The child's strength began to return, the small feet trying to walk on their own. The laughter came more often, soft but bright. Alira watched in wonder, her throat tight with emotion. Her child was alive, her child was smiling, and she knew it was because of him. The dangers had not vanished. Machines still roamed the ruins, hunting. Twice they were forced to hide, pressed close against broken walls. Daniel's weapon was always ready, his eyes always sharp. But he did not fight unless he had no choice. He was careful, smart, and patient. Every decision he made was not for himself, but for them. As the sun lowered, they reached the edge of the battlefield. Beyond the smoke, there was land untouched. By war, grass pushed through the soil and the air was cleaner. Alira's breath caught, her eyes wide. It felt like stepping into another world, a world she had thought she would never see again. Daniel stopped, turning to her. He pointed toward the open land, then at her child, his voice steady though soft. Safe. Alira's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. For the first time she believed that word, truly believed it. They walked further, and soon the sound of voices carried through the air. Not machines, not enemies, but survivors. A small camp hidden in the valley, built from what was left. The sight made Alira's knees weak. She held her child close, her heart breaking with relief. They had made it. The survivors rushed forward. Some stared at her with surprise, some at Daniel with suspicion, but none could deny the truth. He had brought them through the ashes. He had carried them when no one else would. The child clung to Daniel's hand, refusing to let go. Alira watched, her chest heavy with emotion. She had once thought she would die beside her child. She had once thought death was her only gift, but now her child was alive, smiling, safe, because of a human's gift. As the camp welcomed them, Daniel stayed behind for a moment. He looked at the ruins one last time. The smoke, the silence, the endless graves. Then he looked at Alira and her child, and in their eyes he saw the reason he had survived this long. Not to destroy, not to conquer, but to protect. Alira stepped closer, her voice soft. "You saved us. You saved her." Her words shook, heavy with gratitude. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Together, her heart broke again, but not with sorrow. It broke open with something new, something powerful. She saw the truth now, clearer than ever. Humans were not only enemies, they were not only destroyers, they were carriers of warmth, and that warmth could cross even the darkest divide. The child laughed again, pulling both their hands together. In that moment there were no walls, no species, no war. Only a bond stronger than fear, a bond born from kindness, from sacrifice, from hope, the bond of humanity. As the stars began to shine above the valley, Alira lifted her face to the sky. She had once thought death would be her final gift, but she was wrong. Life was the gift, and it was given to her by a human's hand, by a human's heart, by humanity itself.